Nobody tells you this is going to happen. You hit 40, and suddenly your body starts sending you memos you never asked for. The joint that aches when it rains, the morning stiffness that takes 20 minutes to shake off, the energy crash at 3 in the afternoon that used to never happen, the sleep that should be restoring you but somehow is not. And the part that really gets under your skin is that every doctor visit ends with the same answer. Here's a prescription, come back in 6 months. What nobody tells you is that your body, after 40, is not broken. It is inflamed, it is depleted, and it is asking for specific things that the modern diet almost entirely stopped providing. Today, I am showing you 12 herbs that address exactly what changes after 40. The inflammation, the hormonal shifts, the muscle loss, the joint degradation, the immune decline. Herbs that traditional cultures use to keep people strong, mobile, and sharp well into old age. And herb number 9 was taken daily by Japanese monks specifically to maintain physical strength and mental clarity into their 80s and 90s. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand your body after 40 in a way that nobody in a 10-minute doctor's appointment ever had time to explain. Hit subscribe, because every week I post content exactly like this. Real science, practical plants, no pharmaceutical agenda. Herb 1, turmeric. The inflammation switch your body forgot how to turn off. Here's what actually changes after 40 that nobody explains clearly. Before 40, your body's inflammatory response is acute. It switches on to address an injury or infection, handles the problem, then switches off. After 40, that off switch becomes increasingly unreliable. Chronic low-grade inflammation persists even when there is no active threat. And chronic inflammation is not just uncomfortable, it is the underlying driver of joint degradation, cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, and accelerated aging simultaneously. Curcumin, the primary active compound in turmeric, inhibits NF-κB, the master regulatory switch of inflammatory gene expression. A randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine compared curcumin directly to ibuprofen for knee osteoarthritis. The result was equivalent pain reduction with 0 gastrointestinal side effects. For someone over 40 dealing with chronic joint inflammation, that distinction matters enormously, because long-term NSAID use carries its own serious health costs. The bioavailability key that most people miss: combine turmeric with black pepper. Piperine increases curcumin absorption by up to 2,000%. Without it, most of the curcumin passes through without being absorbed. Fresh turmeric root grated into food, golden milk with black pepper, or standardized curcumin extract with piperine daily. This is not a supplement trend. It is the most evidence-backed anti-inflammatory intervention available without a prescription. And herb 2 addresses the specific type of pain that becomes more common after 40 than any other. Herb 2, Boswellia, the joint herb that targets the inflammation pathway your painkillers miss. Most anti-inflammatory medications, including ibuprofen and naproxen, target the COX enzyme pathway. What they do not target is the 5-lipoxygenase pathway, which produces leukotrienes, a separate class of inflammatory molecules that drive the specific joint cartilage degradation associated with aging. Boswellic acids, the active compounds in Boswellia serrata resin, specifically inhibit 5-lipoxygenase. This means Boswellia addresses the inflammatory pathway that NSAIDs miss, making it genuinely complementary rather than simply redundant. A randomized double-blind clinical trial published in Phytomedicine found Boswellia extract significantly reduced knee pain and improved joint function in osteoarthritis patients, with effects appearing within 7 days. A comparative study found Boswellia performed comparably to a COX-2 selective pharmaceutical inhibitor for pain reduction, with a better long-term safety profile. For anyone over 40 whose joint pain is not fully addressed by standard analgesics, Boswellia is operating on the mechanism those analgesics are not covering. Frankincense resin has been used for joint inflammation and respiratory conditions for 3,000 years across Ayurvedic and traditional Middle Eastern medicine. Modern rheumatology is catching up. Traditional use, standardized Boswellia extract for joint pain, osteoarthritis, and inflammatory bowel conditions. And Herb 3 addresses the second major physical change after 40 that most people attribute entirely to aging when it is actually fixable. Herb 3, Ashwagandha, the muscle and hormone herb that reverses the cortisol-driven decline. After 40, cortisol, the primary stress hormone, becomes increasingly dysregulated. Chronic elevated cortisol breaks down muscle tissue, reduces testosterone production, disrupts sleep architecture, suppresses immune function, and drives the chronic inflammation we just discussed. This is not a single problem, it is a cascade, and most people over 40 are living in it without any idea that it is driving what they are calling aging. Ashwagandhas with analydes modulate the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, the cortisol regulation system, addressing the source rather than individual downstream effects. A randomized controlled trial published in the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition found ashwagandha supplementation significantly increased muscle strength, muscle recovery, and testosterone levels in men over 40 compared to placebo. A separate trial found ashwagandha reduced cortisol by up to 27% and improved sleep quality, cognitive function, and physical performance simultaneously. That is not one drug's worth of effects. That is 5. Traditional Ayurvedic medicine classified ashwagandha as a rasayana, a rejuvenating compound specifically used for aging-related decline in strength, vitality, and cognitive sharpness. 3,000 years of observation confirmed by controlled clinical trials. Traditional use, ashwagandha root powder in warm milk, tincture, or standardized extract for muscle maintenance, hormone support, and stress adaptation after 40. And Herb 4 fixes the thing that most people over 40 wake up to every single morning. Herb 4, Valerian and Passionflower, the sleep architecture herbs that restore what aging takes away. Here is something that almost nobody tells you about sleep after 40. The total hours of sleep you get matter less than the architecture of that sleep. Deep slow-wave sleep, the phase where human growth hormone is released, tissue is repaired, and inflammatory compounds are cleared from the brain, declines significantly with age. You can sleep 8 hours and wake up exhausted because the restorative phase is being shortchanged. Valerian root contains valerianic acid, which inhibits the breakdown of GABA, the primary calming neurotransmitter, extending the slow-wave sleep phase without the next-day grogginess of pharmaceutical sleep aids. Passionflower contains chrysin and vitexin, compounds that also modulate GABA activity and reduce sleep onset anxiety, the racing mind at bedtime that becomes more common with age. A clinical trial comparing valerian and passionflower combination to the prescription benzodiazepine oxazepam found comparable improvement in sleep quality with significantly fewer side effects and zero dependency risk. For anyone over 40 whose recovery, pain threshold, and cognitive function are all being compromised by poor sleep quality, and that is the mechanism, not just the hours. These two herbs address the architecture problem that pharmaceutical sleep aids do not solve and often worsen. Traditional use, valerian root tea or tincture taken 30 minutes before sleep, passionflower tea for pre-sleep anxiety and racing thoughts, and Herb 5 addresses the invisible inflammation that most people over 40 have no idea is driving their fatigue. Drop the number of the herb that hits closest to home for you in the comments below. I am building a full dedicated video on whichever one gets the most votes, complete with preparation guides, clinical dosing research, and sourcing advice. Herb 5, ginger, the metabolic fire starter that most people only use in cooking. Most people over 40 notice something that doctors call metabolic slowdown and attribute it entirely to age: slower digestion, more bloating, more stiffness after sitting, higher inflammatory markers, more time needed to recover from physical activity. These are not separate problems. They share a common driver: slowed prostaglandin metabolism and reduced KOX enzyme efficiency in aging tissue. Fresh ginger contains gingerols that inhibit both KOX1 and COX-2 enzymes, the same mechanism as pharmaceutical NSAIDs, while simultaneously stimulating digestive enzyme production, improving gastric motility, and reducing inflammatory cytokine production in the gut lining. A clinical study published in Pain Medicine found ginger supplementation reduced post-exercise muscle pain by 25% in participants over 40, outperforming standard analgesics in the trial group. A separate study found ginger supplementation improved gastric emptying speed and reduced bloating in adults with functional dyspepsia to a degree comparable to pharmaceutical prokinetics. You are getting anti-inflammatory, analgesic, and digestive support from a single herb. Fresh ginger contains significantly higher concentrations of active gingerols than dried powder. Grow it at home in a warm pot from a grocery store root for maximum potency and continuous supply. Traditional use: fresh grated ginger tea, grated into food, or cold-pressed juice for joint pain, digestive sluggishness, and post-exercise recovery. And Herb 6 is the one that East Asian traditional medicine specifically developed for the transition into the second half of life. Herb 6, Goji berry, the adaptogen that protects your eyes, liver, and immune system simultaneously. Most people think of goji berries as a trendy wellness product. They are actually one of the most researched adaptogens in traditional Chinese medicine, specifically for age-related decline. Wolfberries, Lycium barbarum, contain a unique polysaccharide complex that has been studied for its effects on multiple aging-related conditions simultaneously. Research published in the journal Optometry and Vision Science found Lycium barbarum polysaccharides significantly reduced markers of macular degeneration, the leading cause of vision loss after 50, in a randomized controlled trial. The same polysaccharide complex has documented hepatoprotective effects, immune-modulating properties, and neuroprotective activity in peer-reviewed research. A clinical study found goji berry supplementation increased antioxidant capacity, reduced inflammatory markers, and improved energy levels in adults over 55 compared to placebo. In traditional Chinese medicine, goji berries were specifically prescribed to people entering their 40s and 50s for the exact constellation of changes we are discussing: declining energy, deteriorating vision, reduced liver function, and immune vulnerability. They were not eating them as a snack. They were taking them as a daily medicine. Traditional use: 30 grams of dried goji berries daily, goji berry tea, or standardized extract for immune support, eye protection, and anti-aging. And Herb 7 is the one that addresses the cardiovascular changes that begin silently in the 40s. Herb 7, Hawthorn, the heart herb that cardiologists are paying attention to. After 40, the first signs of cardiovascular change begin appearing in tests that most people do not get until something goes wrong: slight arterial stiffening, marginally elevated blood pressure, beginning changes in LDL particle size. Hawthorn berry contains oligomeric proanthocyanidins and vitexin, compounds with documented effects on all three of these markers simultaneously. A systematic review published in the American Journal of Chinese Medicine examined multiple controlled trials on hawthorn for cardiovascular outcomes. The conclusion: hawthorn extract significantly reduces systolic blood pressure, improves arterial elasticity, and reduces LDL oxidation, the process that converts normal cholesterol into arterial plaque, to clinically meaningful degrees. A European multi-center randomized controlled trial found hawthorn extract comparable to low-dose captopril, a first-line pharmaceutical antihypertensive, for blood pressure management in mild hypertension. Without captopril's dry cough, dizziness, and elevated potassium risks, traditional use in European and Chinese herbalism, hawthorn berry tea, tincture, or standardized extract for cardiovascular support, blood pressure maintenance, and arterial health after 40. And Herb 8 is one that most people have in their kitchen right now and are significantly underdosing for the effects that traditional medicine always intended. If any of these herbs are ones you have been ignoring or only using in cooking when they are doing this much for your body, hit like right now It helps me reach the people who need this information while they can still act on it. Herb 8. Garlic. The cardiovascular and immune compound that works better raw than any supplement form. Here is the clinical record on garlic that the pharmaceutical industry would prefer remained buried in journal archives. A meta-analysis of 33 randomized controlled trials found raw garlic consumption reduces systolic blood pressure by an average of 8 points and LDL cholesterol by an average of 15 points. For someone over 40 in the early stages of cardiovascular risk, those are not trivial numbers. Those are the numbers pharmaceutical antihypertensives and statins are prescribed to achieve, with none of the muscle damage, liver enzyme elevation, or fatigue that accompany long-term statin use. The critical detail most people miss, allicin, the active compound responsible for these effects, is produced only when raw garlic is crushed or chopped, and it degrades within minutes of heat exposure. The garlic in your cooked food is nutritionally present but allicin depleted. Raw, freshly crushed garlic consumed within 10 minutes of preparation is the medically active form. 1 to 2 cloves daily, crushed and allowed to sit for 10 minutes, then eaten raw. That is the preparation that Egyptian physicians cataloged in medical papyri 4,000 years ago, and that modern cardiology is confirming with controlled trials. Traditional use: 1 to 2 raw crushed cloves daily for blood pressure, immune support, cardiovascular protection, and broad-spectrum antimicrobial defense. And herb 9 is the one Japanese monks used for a very specific reason. Herb 9, Schisandra berry, the adaptogen that Japanese monks took for physical and mental longevity. Schisandra chinensis, the 5-flavor berry, has been used in traditional Chinese and Japanese medicine for over 2,000 years, specifically for what practitioners called kidney and liver tonification in aging adults. Modern pharmacology has decoded that traditional language into biochemical mechanisms. Schisandra contains schisandrins, a class of compounds with documented hepatoprotective, adaptogenic, and cognitive supporting properties. Research published in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology found Schisandra extract significantly improved cognitive performance, working memory, and accuracy under stress in adults over 40 compared to placebo. A clinical study found Schisandra supplementation reduced liver enzyme markers associated with age-related liver stress and improved detoxification pathway efficiency, the liver function that becomes increasingly important after 40 when toxic accumulation accelerates. Japanese Zen monks incorporated Schisandra as a daily tonic specifically to maintain the physical stamina, cognitive sharpness, and emotional equanimity required for their practice into advanced age. They were not experimenting. They were applying 2,000 years of accumulated empirical knowledge. Traditional use: Schisandra berry tea, tincture, or standardized extract for cognitive support, liver protection, stress adaptation, and physical endurance after 40. And herb 10 is the one that addresses what is arguably the most under-recognized health crisis of the over 40 demographic. Herb 10, Nettle, the mineral-dense anti-inflammatory that reverses the hidden deficiencies driving aging. Here is a pattern that appears in the blood work of a significant proportion of adults over 40. Deficiency in magnesium, iron, calcium, boron, and silica, the exact minerals that maintain bone density, muscle function, joint cartilage integrity, and connective tissue health. These deficiencies are not dramatic enough to create obvious symptoms on their own. They create a slow background deterioration that looks exactly like aging. Stinging nettle leaf contains all of these minerals at concentrations that make it one of the most nutritionally dense plants accessible in temperate climates. Additionally, nettle root contains compounds that modulate sex hormone-binding globulin, the protein that binds testosterone and makes it unavailable to tissues. Research published in Planta Medica found nettle root extract significantly reduced sex hormone-binding globulin, effectively increasing available testosterone in aging men without pharmaceutical intervention. A separate clinical study found Nettle leaf extract reduced inflammatory markers in osteoarthritis patients comparably to standard anti-inflammatory therapy. Traditional use across European, Asian, and Native American medicine. Nettle leaf tea daily for mineral repletion and anti-inflammatory support. Nettle root tincture or extract specifically for hormonal support in men and women over 40. And Herb 11 is the one that most people will be surprised to find on this list. Herb 11, sage, the cognitive protector with documented activity against Alzheimer's mechanisms. After 40, the first subtle cognitive changes begin that most people dismiss as normal forgetting, finding words slightly slower, names taking longer to retrieve, focus requiring more effort to maintain. These are not inevitable. They are the early expression of acetylcholinesterase activity, the enzyme that breaks down acetylcholine, the primary neurotransmitter for memory and attention. Sage contains rosmarinic acid and carnosic acid with documented acetylcholinesterase inhibitory activity, the same mechanism targeted by pharmaceutical Alzheimer's drugs, including donepezil, except without the nausea, insomnia, and muscle cramp side effects. A randomized double-blind controlled trial published in Neuropsychopharmacology found sage extract significantly improved memory, attention, and alertness in healthy adults within hours of a single dose, with effects lasting through a 6-hour testing period. A separate trial specifically in Alzheimer's patients found sage extract produced comparable improvements in cognitive measures to standard pharmaceutical treatment. Traditional use, fresh sage tea or tincture for cognitive support and memory maintenance after 40, sage essential oil diffused for working memory support, fresh culinary sage used liberally in daily cooking, and Herb 12 completes the picture with the one thing that everything else on this list depends on. Herb 12, holy basil, Tulsi, the stress adaptation herb that determines whether everything else works. Here's the conclusion that the last hour of research on aging converges on. Everything accelerates after 40. Inflammation, cognitive decline, hormonal disruption, cardiovascular risk, immune vulnerability, muscle loss, because the stress response that was supposed to be temporary becomes chronic. Cortisol stays elevated. The repair systems that only activate when cortisol is low cannot run properly. Every other intervention you make is fighting uphill against a system in permanent emergency mode. Holy basil, Tulsi, contains ursolic acid, rosmarinic acid, and eugenol, with documented adaptogenic effects that modulate the same HPA axis that ashwagandha targets through complementary mechanisms. A randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial published in the Journal of Ayurveda and Integrative Medicine found Tulsi extract significantly reduced cortisol, improved cognitive function, reduced anxiety, and improved physical recovery simultaneously. The study population was specifically adults over 40 experiencing chronic stress-related health decline. These are your people. Tulsi grew in the courtyard of almost every traditional Indian household, not as decoration, but because the family's daily health was directly tied to its regular use. Every member of the household consumed it in some form every single day. They were not being superstitious. They were doing something that clinical research is confirming with randomized controlled trials 2,000 years later. Here's what the 12 herbs on today's list have in common. None of them treat one condition. All of them address the underlying systems that age after 40: inflammation regulation, cortisol management, hormonal support, mineral repletion, sleep architecture, cardiovascular protection, cognitive maintenance. This is not a list of supplements. This is a framework for supporting your body's own repair and maintenance systems that the modern world has been systematically starving. Pick 2 herbs from today's list that match what your body is telling you most loudly right now. 2. Start there. Use them consistently for 60 days. Pay attention with the same careful observation that traditional cultures paid attention. Your body will tell you what works. Drop a comment below and tell me which one you are starting with and what you are dealing with. I read every single comment, and this community's collective experience is one of the most valuable research databases on this channel. If you are not subscribed yet, hit that button. We post every single week, and the next video goes deeper into something that most people only discover too late: the herbs that reverse the specific damage that modern processed food has done to your gut, your hormones, and your immune system. You will not want to miss it. See you there.